Hi, my name is Angelo Lopez. I'm a Filipino American editorial cartoonist based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm honored today to be speaking to Maia Mislang and Ian Doyle. Now, both of them do work for the Watsonville is in the Heart initiative, and today we'll be talking about the Watsonville is in the Heart initiative, as well as the history of the Filipino American community in Watsonville and Pajaro Valley in California. So I mentioned this before, but I wanted to say officially on camera that you both do important work in preserving our community history. So thank you both very much. It's important work that you both do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with my first question and stuff. So um, could you? This is a two-part question. Could you tell me about Roy Recio, the Tobera Project, and the Watsonville is in the Heart initiative? And also, could you tell me how UC Santa Cruz facilitates the Watsonville is in the Heart initiative? So
I don't know
go.
what you want to take my.
Oh, Ian, do you want to speak first? I feel like you know Roy better than I do.
Oh, well, yeah, I can try. I mean, I saw Angela that you have a whole episode with him. So I direct people watching to go check that out if they want to know more. But Roy Recio, it was obviously a member of the Watsonville Filipino community. He's a descendant of the Manong, and he started the Tobera Project, I believe, in 2020, and to preserve the memory of his community, of his father, of his communities. The many of the Manong that came to and ended up staying in Watsonville in the Pajaro Valley. He was a community organizer, and really, it happened that he sort of, I guess, as a liaison for the wishes of the community, approached Stephen McKay, who's a professor of sociology at UC Santa Cruz, and then Kathleen Gutierrez, who's the other professor that runs the program on the university side in around 2020, and said he wanted to, the community wants their memories to be preserved in the university.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Maia, if you want to talk a little more about what the university does.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So
Or if I
we
miss
are,
anything.
you're perfect. No, our internship, I'm pretty sure, and you have to correct me if it's wrong because it's been a while, but we were funded through the Humanities Institute, which is like, I don't know, like an experiential learning kind of thing at UC Santa Cruz. And that was kind of how they like collected undergraduate researchers. And I'm pretty sure how we got like funding to do research at all
Yeah.
in the humanities district. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. How did this is wasn't one of my questions, but I'm just curious. How did you two get involved in Watsonville is in the Heart? Is it part of your major, I guess, or are you guys just interested in the Filipino American community and stuff? Or
I can start. So I'm Filipino and I transferred to UC Santa Cruz in 2022, and that was my junior year of college. And I kind of got into Santa Cruz, and then I was really hoping to be connected to like local Filipino community things. And in an email, I saw there was a digital exhibit by Watsonville's in the Heart, and that was my first introduction
oh,
to it at
yeah,
all. And I started looking into WIITH and I was really inspired by their work. And I was like, this is history, which I'm majoring in and I love so much. And this is Filipino community stuff that I really want to be involved in. But yeah, I just was really, really like inspired and I just like knew that I really, really wanted to work with Watsonville's in the Heart. And so
yeah,
I remember, I think, and I don't remember if I did this or not, but I'm pretty sure I emailed Professor Kat, and Ian and I both were in her History of the Philippines class,
Oh,
fall of I think 2022, and I remember we both went to like the like October like Filipino Fest in Watsonville, and we were like, I just
lots of
remember
lumpia and
so
pancit.
much. It was so awesome, yeah. And they were doing the singing and the dancing and stuff. But yeah, we were in this class, and I just really wanted to be involved. I felt a little annoying at points because I was like, remember with, I want to be in with. But I feel like it paid off pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Was it the same for you, Ian? Is that, you got swept up in the that November festival, or is it October or November? I forgot.
October.
Yeah.
October. You got swept up in the food, and you thought you should learn
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not Filipino. I'm from San Francisco. So I grew up around a lot of Filipinos, and I was also doing a history major, loved history, but then I sort of felt like, okay, I'm not doing a whole lot with it other than just going to class and stuff. And then yeah, so I was in this history of the Philippines class, went to the festival in Watsonville, and then there was also a unveiling of the digital archive that they did. So actually, my one of my best friends from college uh, is Filipino. Is taking this class called PhD, which is Filipinx Historical Dialogue, I believe is what it stands for. And it's a
it.
student-run class that's all about Filipino history and all this sort of stuff. So then they told me about it and said, hey, we should all go because we were living together. And I
Oh,
remember going there and seeing just all these pictures up on I had no idea what this project really was outside of, a bit
okay.
of context. But then I was seeing all these pictures that I just been to my neighbor, the sort of matriarch of the household, this my neighbors who were Filipino. It was her 90th birthday, and I was seeing almost exactly the same pictures, very similar kind of things up on the screen. And I thought to myself, like, wow, that is history. Why aren't these things being preserved in
Yeah.
in an archive? And so I was saying before started recording that my focus in history is actually like sort of Cold War, Middle Eastern history. So
Yeah.
very different, right? But when I saw Watsonville's in the Heart, I saw what I think is the future of history, which is like community based, which is sort of from the bottom up. And really taking in and treasuring these sort of everyday pictures or oral history. I think all of that is the future of
Yeah.
study and field of history. And just to wrap up, also not being Filipino myself, it was really important to be, or I think I'm mixed, but I look white, and I
Yeah.
think being in any sort of space where you're dealing with other people's stories, I wanted to make sure if I'm doing that, I don't want to be extracting, like just going in and doing the research, and then you get out there and then you never talk to them again. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so Watsonville's in the Heart really appealed to me because it's constantly, it's a community based organization first. Really, the community dictates everything, and so that was really important to me as well.
Okay. Are your Filipino friends annoyed that you know more about the culture than they do?
We took the same class, but he knows more than me. The year after, we were still working together, and he would reference things from the class, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm so bad. I don't even remember that."
Is it kind of annoying, I guess, or?
No, it's beautiful. I always appreciate it. Yeah,
Oh,
he has a
okay.
wealth. Yeah.
No,
I
I was
try
just
not to be
kidding. Don't
annoying.
worry. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, here, let me ask my first history question and stuff. So, since you're both history majors, can you tell me a little bit about the early history of the Filipino farm workers of Pajaro Valley? And along with that, could you tell me about the Watsonville Riots of 1930? Oh, and do you want me to pick? I don't know who wants to speak first. Mia, do
Well,
you want to speak first, or well,
I
Ian, do you want to? Or I don't care.
You
sorry,
can
yeah,
go,
I was,
Ian.
well, I was going to say maybe you should, because I conducted a mapping project that really focused on the riots. So I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess we could go back. So most of the Filipino farm workers in the Pajaro Valley were recruited from their local provinces in the Philippines. And so what we see with the community with Watsonville in the heart is that many of the families are from similar regions of the in the Ilocos region.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and so they're basically like we kind of saw that like if an uncle came, sometimes he would bring cousins or his brothers, or people would come with their fathers or stuff like that. And what kind of developed in the Pajaro Valley was that, so sorry for a background too, men are being recruited in the Philippines by American, contractors. And these men are working through in the fields throughout California, and they're working up the West Coast. They're working in canneries in Watsonville. They're working in canneries in Alaska.
no, okay.
Yeah, and I would, if you have more specific questions, I would probably have an easier time answering that because I'm just thinking of so many things.
Oh, okay.
But
Were they mostly Ilocano then? Mostly.
we see a lot of Ilocano families. There also were many families from like the Visayas. There's like one family that's pretty close to us. They're from Aklan. But yeah, I think there's really heavily focused on bringing Ilocano men to America.
Oh,
And if I
okay.
can interject, sorry, part of that is specifically because of the history of American colonization. Like in the Ilocos region, a lot of people were being cleared off of land that they had traditionally, held, even if it was sort of like peasant small holding land. So the disruption by American colonization really also allowed for, and this is why you see, I think, more of the people coming from these regions that were more heavily affected. So they don't have money or any source of income. So then you
Um,
get these labor contractors or whatever coming in to swoop. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there were some, like specifically in Watsonville, there were major like farms and canneries that people were working at. I'm just trying to think about like helping build a like image of what Watsonville looked like.
yeah.
And Ian did the map stuff. He knows the area really well. So maybe I'm not the right person to be answering that. But yeah, I
Were
think
some of them seasonal since they worked in the canneries and stuff, or were they there the whole time, or did they travel through the state and stuff? Or I'm kind of curious.
yeah, most of these men are traveling, even while they had like created like families in Watsonville, they still were traveling up and down the coast, and I think even still up to more northern Canaries. I even like and yeah, I can't remember who specifically, but I know that there were men that were also doing work in like the South, like in Louisiana, and I'm pretty sure there were also men in the Midwest who were doing agricultural labor. And so it's really not like California is the only place, but these men are going all over, and they're,
Okay.
yeah, and it is seasonal work, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just say quickly, sorry, a lot of them came through Hawaii, and then that, yeah, it's that most Watsonville's in the heart centers around the people who ended up staying in Watsonville once they got older, basically. I mean, like Maya said, some of them would have sort of settled down or like created families or had somewhere.
Yeah.
But even once they got older, some of them were still yeah, all over California, the whole circuit up the entire western seaboard, as Maya was saying. And
Okay. Was it just because they got paid so low, they just had to keep working, I guess, or
yeah,
okay.
and then you follow where the crop harvests are going, and then yeah, in the winter when it's when you there's not so much harvest going on, then you work in the canneries.
Yeah. Okay. Could you tell me about the Watsonville riot of 1930? Or
Yeah, so like I said, I worked on a mapping project, which I don't know if you want me to send you a link or something. Maybe you can put it,
oh,
but
okay. Yeah, sure.
excuse me. Sorry. So And I think you have another, we might talk about this a little more later, but 1930 is obviously the, a time of economic depression, right? And I think something that you see a lot in sort of the major narrative, but what was going on at the time was that there was this influx of poor white workers from, say, like the Dust Bowl. You see a lot of Okies from Oklahoma coming into Watsonville, and there's a dance hall down out by the beach on Palm Beach, just to the west of Watsonville, and it was a taxi dance hall where Filipino men would dance with mostly white women, and they're paying to dance. And this was a really common thing for Filipino farm workers because, as people might not know, we didn't mention this earlier, but the labor contractors in the American government specifically wanted men to come from the Philippines because they were under the strange idea that if there were only men, if they didn't come with women, then they wouldn't settle down and make families. So you've got a lot of men who are, some are very young, some are a bit older, who are coming over, and they don't make very much money, and they just want to have a good time. And this was a pretty common thing, was paying to dance with women at these taxi dance halls. So this really becomes sort of the flashpoint of the race riots, where generally, well, sorry, now I'm kind of contradicting myself, but basically what happens at this, at the dance hall, a mob of white people come down, and they'd been basically inflamed by this article that was published by a judge in the local newspaper, and sort of things that we've seen before. If people know anything about sort of the history of anti-Asian, anti-Filipino, even anti-Black, just racism in general in the United States, these men, specifically to their Filipino identity, they're being characterized as like they're hypersexualized. They're both simultaneously infantilized as like, they're not real men, but then they're also super suave and hot because they like to wear nice suits and they look good. That's objective fact. But no, but they're being characterized in this way. And then you've got tensions being inflamed by a local judge. You've got tensions that are being inflamed by this influx of white workers, and sort of this perfect mess. And it followed with a couple days of rioting, and one man dead from in Tobera who was shot in his bunk while he was sleeping, and just more violence. And and I guess one last thing I'll sort of say about it, and I don't know if you have any follow-ups, but the reason I was saying I'm kind of contradicting myself is because, as we sort of found in the research, it's hard to find who was actually doing the rioting, as in like the makeup of them. But the only people that, as far as I know, got arrested were these young men who were supposedly from good families in Watsonville. So it's not always as simple as like the poor workers were getting whipped up against, the also poor Filipino workers.
I guess the racism went across class lines, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, we kind of see that, I feel, throughout like all of the books that we've been reading about like the history of agricultural labor in America, is that like workers are being tricked to like believe in like divisions by race, and not workers, but people who are in charge of labor are using these quote unquote differences to make sure that these different racial groups aren't working together like towards a similar goal, but instead are, continuing to
They kind of pit
hurt
against
each
each other.
other.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it really undermines a lot of solidarity that was
Oh,
beginning to grow and really had a hard time.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. So, okay. Well, um, another question. So, what's the history of Filipina migration and labor, and what important contributions did women make to the FilAm community? I guess Mia, I guess you can go first.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I like this question. I've been thinking about this one a lot. And I feel like Ian just knows so much about this, but I'm happy to try. So we see a lot of Filipino migration after World War II because, as Ian said, Filipino women weren't wanted to come to America. And
Mm.
they're, correct me if I'm wrong, but Filipino men were fighting in World War II. After, I think, with the Tidings-McDuffie Act, they were allowed to bring women over, and this kind of started
Oh,
like the development of like Filipino families
yeah.
with like both parents being Filipino. And it's really similar to what we're seeing labor-wise with men. Women are working in domestic labor, they're working in the fields alongside men, they're working in canneries. And I think also like as families are like being established over time, a lot of the women hold like consistent jobs in canneries.
Oh,
Um, yeah. And they one of the like most important feels so like there's people below, but like I think one of the most like loved and really like special women in the community was Rosita Tabasa, and she owned the Philippine Gardens or the Oriental Gardens or the Philippine Cafe. I know it went through a few different
oh, okay. She
restaurant
was sort of an
restaurant
entrepreneur,
names.
I guess. Was she an entrepreneur?
I think so. I don't really know how to answer that,
Oh,
Ian, if you want to
yeah,
give me your
yeah.
opinion.
She was a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of things.
She was everything.
She did one of the major figures period
Yeah.
in the community. Yeah, owned a cafe or a restaurant that went through a bunch of different forms, but it was where like all the Manong would go and hang out. And
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
she, yeah.
Yeah. Um, what time period was this? You said after the 40s, that's when Philippine women can come, right? So was she during the 40s and 50s, I guess, or
So I'll say, I think it was the War Brides Act or
oh, okay.
something.
Dude, you're right. You're
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
But basically, yeah, after serving in the war, as Maya said, a lot of
Yeah.
these men were able to actually marry a Filipino wife. But we do see some examples, and I wish we knew more
Uh,
of, there are pictures of women in some of the labor crews from before the war, pardon me. And that's something I think we're working to, or we'd like to know more about, but we don't have a ton of information on it.
oh,
I forget about Rosita. Uh, if she,
she sounds pretty cool.
yeah,
She
she's
was awesome. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
there's
I remember. Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. Una, one of the previous interns, we were the same year. Yeah. I don't know. You're gonna say that too.
yeah.
Yeah. One of her like her big like projects with Watsonville in the Heart was like learning about Rosita and her contributions to the community. And I remember um she said that I think Rosita's brother, oh God, I forget that, but I just remember her being like Rosita was helping people
Um,
immigrate to America, and she just like was very good at like creating a community where people could feel safe and people could rely on her. And
uh,
um
was she like
yeah.
a mom in the community, sort of like a mother of the whole community type thing, figure, I guess? I mean, if she's helping people come to America and, doing are any of her shops still around, or have they gone away? Yeah.
I don't think any of her shops are still around. And sorry for the helping people immigrate, she was helping people like like translate forms or helping people like while they were in America, like process forms and stuff. I don't know if that's
Well, okay, okay.
a
I get it,
specific
but that still
detail,
sounds
but
important and stuff. So she seemed highly educated.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to read up on her on her
Okay.
page a little bit.
I've never heard of her, so this is the first time, but she sounds very interesting. But I think that's one of the important things that you both do. If it wasn't for you both doing the research, people like me would never have known about her and stuff. I'm only finding out about her this very second from when you're talking about her. So that's kind of cool and stuff. So, yeah. So, as an aside, doing work on this project, does it help you because you're both history majors? Does it make you more passionate about, I'm right to have gone on this major, I guess. Does it make you more passionate about your major?
Yes.
Ian, do you want to answer this one first?
I mean, it helps you realize how important history is, right?
Exactly. And I mean, like I was saying in the beginning, I just think this is what history should be and what the future of the field is. It's really inspiring to be a part of it because, yeah, you know, so often, well, most of history is real people, real families
Yeah.
that you just don't hear about. And, the way that history is told often is like great men and sort of this comic book version of things where like some
Yeah.
people are really good, and the reality of it is it's real people living and working and loving each other and eating good food. And so a lot of that gets thrown by the wayside in traditional history.
Yeah.
Things are getting better, right? But this, I think I can speak for everyone and say it lit a fire under all of us,
Oh, that's
like,
cool.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
Okay.
very
Yeah. Okay.
important.
Yeah. Well, I got a message saying we have 10 minutes for this first
Okay.
video. So let me
Okay.
ask the next question and stuff. How did the Filipino American community interact with the white community, the Latino community, and other communities in the region? And were there any conflicts within the community or with or between communities or
Ian,
should
you
I take
should
it
take
again?
this one.
Yeah, Ian. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I was kind of touching on earlier, during the Great Depression, you have an influx of poor white workers. But what we see in the community is, or in our archives and in the oral histories, is in like a really, I think, amazing mixed diverse community that,
Oh,
not to
okay.
overuse the term, but that comes out. And it's not so simple as just like, again, some that white workers were pit against, they were. But then what you see is like talking about women, because there weren't so many Filipino women, a lot of the men would get married to Mexican or white women.
Yeah.
And we have an example of a white woman who, you know, was facing being completely ostracized, or was completely ostracized by her family for marrying a Filipino. And
Oh,
she, despite all of the other social pressure and all this stuff, she used her ability to purchase land because Filipinos weren't allowed to own land at that time.
yeah.
She bought land for not only her husband and like her family, but her husband's, her husband's brother, I believe, multiple brothers were able to, even like a cousin, were all able to work and live on this land that was purchased under her name. So
Oh,
you see a lot of, I think in Watsonville, everything centers around the land and farm work because that's where, to this day, it's still one of the most agriculturally productive, or in terms of money, uh, regions, and even in California, which is already a very highly concentrated agricultural place. Driscoll's is from Watsonville, if people know those berries. So that's central to everything. And so the reason I bring that up is because you have these people working in the farm together. You have a lot of Mexicans who are braceros, but also Mexicans who obviously was Mexican land before it was American. There's a long-standing Japanese community. And so, like any place, you're going to have conflicts, the race riot being the most, I think, sharp and standout time of conflict. But what we do see, I think, and what our archive and the oral histories really bring out is that there is this really, just as long as, or, far more than there was conflict, there were these the communities would blend amongst one another. Sorry, I'm kind of going on, but another woman who's really important, Juanita Sulai Wilson, is the daughter of so she's part of the generation we work with. Her father was a Manong, and her mother was a white woman, but her mother was actually one of the original members of the Filipino Women's Association, I think it is, in Watsonville.
It was Women's Club, yeah.
Club, yeah, sorry. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Maia, but
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, and I think that ties back because I meant to say this too about the question about with women, but we're kind of seeing a lot of like personal relationships develop and these women relying on each other. But yeah, going back to the women's club, Juanita, sorry, I frazzled myself when I'm thinking about the time. No worries. I'm just all over the place. But yeah, actually, Ian, you take the women's club. I can't think about
Sorry,
I can't think
No,
straight
I didn't mean to
now.
put you on the
when I
spot.
listen to this, I'm
Fine.
thinking like how courageous they were and stuff. Both I'm the odd thing with me is I'm a Filipino, but I'm married to a white woman from Watsonville. But
Oh,
she knows
wow.
nothing about this history and stuff. I didn't know about this history until recently and stuff. But yeah, she's always telling me if she ever gets mad at me, she'll incite a mob against me and stuff. So that's a joke. I actually didn't really know much about the Watson. Her family came here in 1974. So her family was not a long time. So she doesn't know the history of Watsonville and stuff. So she was just as shocked as I was. When I found out a little bit about the Watsonville riots and when I was in college, but we mostly focused on Carlos Bulasan and Americas in the Heart and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, I just admire them and stuff. So there were those cross community friendships, I guess.
Yeah, I think again, like I was saying, the agricultural labor is such a central topic. It's, of course, reality is always complicated, but you see, like around the time of the UFW strikes, we know that Filipinos were some of the most. They basically started the whole farm workers movement, because you had, but you see in Watsonville, I think a lot of people, because they worked in the fields with Mexicans, for instance, and they're doing the same thing, they could see what was going on. And you see a lot of solidarity between the groups. And, I think families are just a great way to highlight it. And we talk about them so much because you have all these mixed families. You have
Hello, hello, hello.
identity.
I'm sorry,
families that are
you froze, I guess.
sorry.
Yeah, you froze for a second. What did you say before?
Sorry, I was just I think there's a strong Mexipino identity. A lot of families are half Mexican, half Filipino. I was just saying that families, I think, are sort of our go-to example of different groups of people getting along, because
Yeah.
just so many of our community members are mixed, and yeah, the I guess sort of all over the place. One last thing, I guess, on the women's club is that, like I was saying, this one of these original members was a white woman, but they sort of saw it like, well, you've got Filipino kids, so you got to learn how to take care of Filipino kids, or but to
Yeah.
teach them the tinikling and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. 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 Oh, they had the canes to do the tinikling.
I
Oh,
think
okay.
so. They would put on like dances, and
Oh, that's
uh,
cool.
put on the Filipiniana for the girls and stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds like she knows more about the culture than I do. I was raised in Navy bases, so people always accuse me of being a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. So, but yeah, welcome back to you both. I'm relieved you came back. So, so okay, but before I go to the next question, I just had a small question.
Sure.
Because you mentioned about about the UFW strike. Was there a strong union presence in Watsonville at that time or no?
Not really. It's like I sort of alluded to, it gets complicated. I mean, there's definitely a history of unionization. In terms of the UFW, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, no,
But
it was just a question that occurred to me because you mentioned it and stuff. So okay.
yeah, I guess I'll just say quickly, one of our the former mayor, actually,
Oh,
was his father was a union member.
oh,
Here, actually, I've got him on my shirt.
oh, okay, okay. Was that him?
That's with
Oh,
his
okay.
with his little prized fighting
Is that a
rooster,
chicken
but
or oh, okay, yeah.
yeah.
I got a shirt too, so I think it's more generally Filipino. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know. Can you still buy those shirts or no?
I don't know, actually. I got it at the last community Christmas party.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
to celebrate. There was an animation that was made for our sowing seeds exhibition that told the
Oh,
story of three different people in Watsonville.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask. I forgot your professor's names, but if they have extra shirts, I'm happy to buy them. Oh, okay. So okay, here let me go to my next question and stuff. Um, you mentioned the Watsonville is in the Heart Oral History Project. Um, can you tell me about it and where can you find it? Oh,
Sure. Sure, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you about it. So Ian and I first came into Watsonville's in the Heart as oral history interns. And so first we spent a quarter like learning about oral history best practices. And then we got paired up with different community members. And this kind of looked like a preliminary call where we meet people for the first time and we get background information on like their names and their siblings and their parents and the places they worked and kind of like other like we kind of take these phone calls and see what naturally comes up in these conversations, which helps guide like the recorded interviews that we do later.
oh,
Um, yeah, sorry. Okay, yeah, but so I interviewed two people. I think Ian interviewed three or
Three.
four,
three.
three,
Okay.
three. I think three people. I think some multiple times.
Yeah. What was that
Oh
But
yeah,
experience
no,
like?
that is four.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. What was that experience like interviewing them? Was it like, was it like you're talking to history, I guess? Or were you peeling the layers back of the onion to history and stuff or
I'll say it's interesting because I mean, yeah, you totally are. It's just funny because everyone's sort of different. And to most people, it's like, even though they've agreed to do an oral history interview and they've indicated that they wanted to, you still just sort of think, well, it's like, it's my life. So a lot of them will say, well, I don't really have that much to say. Like, I don't really know what to tell you. Then as you start asking questions, they've got all these crazy stories, and you're like sitting there. Wow, we'd have meetings afterwards and we'd report on, okay, I've just done an oral history interview, and you just end up like telling all these crazy stories from someone's life, and it just like, and then another thing they told me, because they have so much going on. But some people, are just gonna talk
Yeah.
for 2 hours straight, and that's great. Some people are a little more reticent, and then you have to figure out how to sort of draw them out. But I think that's what I just said is one of the really powerful things, I think, because again, everyone just sort of thinks like, well, it's just my everyday life. That's not really history. Well, yeah, it is. And then I think a lot of people came away feeling sort of empowered. I'd like to think because
Yeah.
after you've done it, it's like, no, what you lived through is important, and people need to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there was one when we were training for this, there was this one interview that I sat on that Malaya conducted. And I remember like we were having the interview, and it was like really awesome to watch and stuff. But I remember I had talked to this man a year later, I think at one of our like museum events, and
Yeah.
he was super like the interview was so awesome, and there were so many things that I wish I had talked about, and
Oh.
like referencing like stories that he had shared with us. And it was, yeah, I think, like we are like talking about history, but I think like a really important component, and especially like Ian is touching on this, is like I
Yeah.
think oral history interviews, the way that we kind of are practicing them, like I feel like the important thing that we step away with is that we're like connecting with these people about like valuing their family members. And often people are like, I didn't see my dad in this light, or I didn't like consider like my mom in this way. And so, I think it's really special, like because we think that these people are important and we think that they're special. And so kind of being able to like show people that,
Yeah.
that we value them in this way, and they kind of um are like, oh, like this is
Yeah. It
surprising
makes it
also.
makes history personal, right? It makes
Yeah,
history personal.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice. Like I think for the both of us, we would have these interviews, and then we would see these people again later, and
Oh, yeah.
we'd feel like really familiar with them. And so, I sometimes think about this now in my life, especially,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I wish I could just do an oral history interview with everybody because I feel like, you talk so much and become so comfortable. But yeah.
I'm curious. Both of you mentioned that this is something new in history, right? I mean, this is like is this an innovation in history, doing oral history projects now, or I don't know, what was history like before? I mean, as opposed to now, where the uh, um, like I'm trying to think and stuff. Um, when you hear stories from the actual people who lived it, does that change things?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
I would say, I mean, so oral history has been around. I could be wrong. I mean, at least since the 80s, I think. But
Oh, okay.
but it hasn't been, it's been looked down on when it
Oh,
first sort of came around
but
as
why was
like,
it looked down on?
I mean, I think it's because it's not like I think, without getting into too much of my own personal feelings, I think
Oh,
there's a tendency for the field of history, it wants to be considered as not a science, but a scientific sort of undertaking. It's based
uh,
on reason, and there's, it's according to the facts, and it's you try to remove as much of your own bias as possible, and your own as a writer or as a historian. So that's sort of been the prevailing, I think, mentality in history, is to try and write these very objective histories. And so when you introduce oral history, a lot of people, or sort of the field viewed it, and I think that perception is changing, but as very imprecise, and you're just relying on whatever this person had to say about it, and you hear different from family members, you hear different ways of remembering a story, but then I think so yeah, that's sort of it's imprecise, it's totally subject to the whims of our memory, which is faulty, right? But
are you all right?
But that's
Yeah.
but
Sorry.
no worries.
I
But
think there's also
go ahead.
I think like based on what like we see like popular history being like taught to people and studied as is like top down, where we're looking at like people who are in charge, and we're looking at like official documents and stuff, which of course we're incorporating in Watsonville's in the Heart too, but like oral history allows interviewers to talk with like anybody, and so we're validating anybody's voices. And I think it kind of like lifts off any potential boundaries to talking to people, or for like barring specific people from talking about like their community's history and stuff. And so I think I don't know, there's a little bit of I hate to say this, but I think it's like a little bit of elitism for not liking oral histories. Also because of the subjectivity and people's personal like perspectives on things. But
well, yeah, I mean,
it's just more accessible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I was going to say, not that I think it even necessarily has to be like the most, oh no, oral history actually is precise. Even if it wasn't precise, I think it would still be an incredibly important and valid method of research. But then, in doing the mapping project, this wasn't necessarily always oral history. We used oral histories, and then we were just out there with the community members and talking to them and using the memory that they have of, they weren't alive during the race riots, but they have the memories that were passed down from them from their parents, even though their parents oftentimes wouldn't talk about it much. That's a whole other topic. But their intimate knowledge of the land and their experience and their perspective actually does lead you to things that are I could go on. There's like oral history, for an example. That's how a lot of people were able to transmit history for a very long time, and you're able to see that. This is a total tangent, so sorry, but like when it comes to the Odyssey and the Iliad, these like Greek stories, they were passed down through oral history. And I think a lot of new historical research is unveiling that these methods of passing down history are actually a lot more accurate than we think. And that people were able to discover where Troy was, the city of Troy for the Trojan Wars, through these texts that were passed down originally orally. So it's not just like this. That's sort of my rant about that.
I'm kind of curious. So it's part of the gift of oral history is the fact that you're not just learning facts, but you're learning how people felt about that experience and stuff, about living through it, not just the cold hard facts, but what did people feel about experiencing those particular events? And I guess just knowing how they felt is actually pretty important too, I guess.
Okay. Exactly. And the way that they remember things, what they remember, what they don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious for both of you, now that you've gone through this oral history experience and stuff, are you curious to know about your own families or your own parents and stuff? I know with me, my parents are getting, I've done a few where my dad would talk about his history, or my uncles and aunts and stuff. But now that you've gone through this, are you curious about your own parents too?
Yeah, totally. That actually is one of the like practice things that Maia and Kristen and Kat had to do. Is they I think we had like winter break or whatever. And so we went back home and we were supposed to interview like one to two maybe family members. And I remember like starting to do this with my mom's parents, and like kind of seeing a side of them that they never talked about. And this totally opened my eyes to be like this is something I need to be doing more. And so this
Are
is
you like,
unethical.
you did that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I like seriously, yes. Like I learned recently about how like my Lolo met my Noni, that's what we call my Lola, for the first time. And I probably shouldn't repeat it on the
No, no,
computer,
you don't
but
have to. If
no,
it's
no, no. But like if I didn't have this, there would have been no reason for me to even probe. And so
oh.
after I started really unethically just like getting them to talk about something and pressing record on my phone, but that's going nowhere. So I could do that. But yeah, it's like everybody now, especially my older family members, like yeah, it's totally something that I'm really into and I'm trying to do and I'm trying to do back home and stuff. So yeah, for me, yeah, I think Ian
I'm
too.
sorry, I'm laughing.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. I mean, you were just making me think like something that we hear a lot from community members is like they're sad because they didn't think to ask their parents some of the questions that we would like to know about. So they're having to try to piece things together just from what they did know. Um, or I had someone who I interviewed say to me like, "Oh, my kids never asked me about anything like this."
Yeah, yeah.
And my dad is we're pretty close. There aren't really any taboo topics. So I've heard about, some of the things that he's done that maybe parents.
Does some of them make you pop your eyes out and stuff? Like,
Well, as knowing him, not so much anymore. No, but like he's willing to share, right? And he tells stories all the time. But even still, when I sat down to do exactly what Maia was talking about, the practice sort of interview with him, I heard things I'd never heard of, and
oh,
or got his perspective on things that I'd never realized or
yeah.
the way he felt about certain things. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bring out dirty laundry. So don't worry.
Yeah, this is a different mission. Yeah, it's funny too. Like I remember we for some reason like I started doing this with my grandparents and then we got interrupted. And a few days later they were like, "Do you have to finish the interview?" And so it was like, "Oh, like you guys are into this too." Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering, like with me, I want to get some of the history of my both my dad and my mother-in-law before they pass away, because once they're gone, it's gone and stuff. So,
Yeah.
And that
yeah.
was a big impetus, I think, for the whole project starting in the first place was that uh, the Manong generation is gone now, and
Yeah.
then a lot of that the first generation is getting old now too. So Roy really wanted to be able to preserve not just what's left of the Manong, but of this also. I think something that we find as well is that the when we're doing oral histories too, the people will be like, "Oh, well, you don't really want to hear about me so much. You're here to learn about my dad." And it's like, no, well, you guys are a really interesting, cool generation too,
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
have so much to share.
yeah.
So
Oh, okay, okay. Well, thank you both for sharing. I'm just realizing since we're limited, let me ask my next question and stuff. But it still has to do with this. I mean, since we're talking about the oral history project, tell me about the digital archive project and stuff. And also, who are some of the families who contributed to this digital archive? Oh, actually, I forgot to ask, where can we find the oral history project?
Sure. We just have everything on a website that's pretty easy to work around. The URL is wiith.ucsc.edu, and
Oh,
I can email you all of the
yeah,
links.
send it to me. I'm going to try to
Sure.
finish this video tonight and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So,
Awesome.
but okay. So now the next is the digital archive project. Tell me about it, and then what families contributed to it.
Yeah, okay, I can take this one.
Oh, okay, yeah, 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 sure.
Um, so yeah, most of the work that I did at Watsonville in the Heart was on our digital archive. And so once I really started working with it, it was easier to kind of navigate the website. But we have so far families kind of like, sorry, our collections are based on the different families. And a lot of these contributing families are like the Sulay family. I worked a lot with the Malaris photos. And there's, oh God, yeah, sorry, there's a lot of families of ballerinas, just to name a few names that I worked with. Um, but yeah, as far as the archive process looks like, they meet with these families who show interest. And, a lot of people are showing interest, but it also depends on like what works out and how much time we have. Um, but we meet with families often in their homes and they have like lots of like photo albums or
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
like binders of like documents and stuff. And we just sit down and we have a scanner and someone's on the
Oh,
laptop. And the community members who are sitting with us. And so we look at each of these photos and we scan them and we ask them like, what do you remember about this? Where was this taken or who's in this photo? And that's kind of how we gain more insight. And then we write it up for the archive. But yeah, does that answer your question?
well, no, no, it does and stuff. Sounds like it took a long. It sounds like it sounds like they developed a level of trust
Yeah,
with
yeah.
you to be able to want to share your stuff and stuff. Did it take a while to develop that trust, or was that trust instantaneous?
So we came in while the project had been like living for a few years. And so
Oh, okay.
whenever I went on these community archiving trips, it was like with Christina and with Malaya. And I most often visited Juanita Sulai and like they already knew each other super, super well. And so
Oh,
I was really lucky to just come into this like really comfortable atmosphere and be really welcomed by Juanita and her Alan and her Alan.
It is
Um,
her Alan.
Alan. Yeah, but it just really naturally, like you're talking about family photographs, and like Ian said, they just look like photographs that like and you've seen before, and so it feels like really familiar. And so Juanita in particular, I was working a lot with her photos, like just on my laptop, and I hadn't met her. I was just processing her photos on my laptop, and I was just seeing like baby photos, and these people were growing older and older, and so I felt really like emotional about kind of seeing these, and I finally
oh,
met her
yeah,
for the
yeah,
first
yeah.
time. Yeah, and I just had visited her so many times that we kind of also developed a relationship and stuff. So yeah, there is a lot of trust and sharing and
Okay.
um yeah, but it's really special.
Yeah, because it all sounds that's very personal information stuff, right? So,
It's super personal. Yeah, and it almost like, I remember feeling like they were sharing a lot, and so it kind of made me want to share and
oh,
kind of have more of a reciprocal like
yeah.
giving. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I guess if I can say something really quickly, like
Yeah.
one of the really important principles of the project, I probably got to shove it in somewhere, is
Yeah.
this idea of like rolling consent, and also again, basically that the community is ultimately in control. Like these are their stories, and so they
You're not
should.
forcing them.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
yeah.
So at any time people can say, hey, we want to take
Yeah.
this down, or
Okay.
when we do
Okay.
the oral history interviews, I want this part cut out. And even after it's already been uploaded, they can still say take it down or take this part out, we don't want that, because like
It's
I
their
said,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, it's their life, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
their story. And I that's, like I was saying, one of the things that attracted me so much to the project is because history does have a history of being very extractive, and you know this is their story, and they own it. So
Yeah. Okay. Is part of it since you're doing mostly older people, right? And so is part of their willingness to and their enthusiasm for contributing is that they feel an obligation to the younger generation so that they know and stuff, or does that make sense or no?
yeah,
Yeah. I wouldn't say like an obligation, but I think we're kind of all coming at this with like a lot of excitement and a lot of interest. And so maybe even if they do feel obligation, which I'm sure like thinking like if they're starting to think about from outside sources, like what did my family do? And I'm seeing these people work on this project and like my parents did this, then I'm kind of compelled. Um, I can, yeah, kind of see them feeling that way. But I think like any sense of like I owe this to people, just like as Ian was saying, I feel like we do a pretty good job of being like you are in charge and you don't have to share anything you don't want. But I feel like it all just naturally kind of comes out anyways, especially when there's no like microphone around.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the best moments don't get caught on recording. I was just gonna say quickly, we really have to thank Roy for a lot of it, like talking about trust,
Yeah.
because he was already so much a part of the community, and he was really who early on, from what we hear as well from
Yeah.
before we joined the project, uh, he was the one who made all those connections and was able to say like, I know this person. And it's funny because like we'll be at like a community event and he'll say to everyone like, I know you're tired of hearing it, but like we need you, like, so sometimes it's him get like, come on, you got to do it, and they're kind of like, okay, I guess I'm doing. But then a lot of the interviews that we've done, I think, yeah, you hear like it might not be the first thing on everyone's mind, but they definitely have. It's been really inspiring to see how much the community is so like excited, and
Yeah.
how they really feel uh, the importance of it, of wanting to have their stories be preserved, and which I think is sort of the main thing. And I think we might talk about education stuff in a second, but like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a really important thing for them, is they want their history being taught in local schools and
Yeah.
etc. So
Yeah, I think Roy
Yeah,
is doing a wonderful job and stuff. So spearheading all this. So yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, since
totally
you
is.
mentioned it and stuff. Oh, did you have anything to add or?
Oh, no, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Since you mentioned it. So okay. What are some other educational resources that the Watsonville and the Heart Initiative offers for people? And since you mentioned the mapping project, tell me about the mapping project.
Yeah, so it was sort of my definitely wasn't my pet project, because a lot of people were instrumental in having it start, and helping it, but I did a lot of work on it, and it is actually a set of two maps. On the one hand, they're both digital interactive maps, uh, and sorry, total tangent, but I think something that's really important about the project of having like for instance the archive be digital.
Yeah.
A lot of people might not know this, but a lot of the archives that historians need to use for their research are pretty old fashioned, and most of them aren't online, or even if they are, they're hard to access. So access is a really major problem with this stuff. So I think that's a really important part of the project, is that everything is so accessible, and that's part of what's sort of
Yeah.
really, yeah, important. And but anyway, what I was trying to say is that digital maps makes it easier for to use as an educational tool, I think, because that was sort of what they were created as a, with that in mind, was to be used for education. So it's two different maps. One, as I was talking about before, sort of chronicles the race riots, but it also goes into how it sort of had the race riots and the murder of Furman Tobera had reverberations in the Philippines, because his body was eventually taken back to the Philippines, and his murder sparked actually calls for independence, and so it goes into some of that. And then the second map is sort of what we call a counter map,
Yeah.
because a lot of times the narrative about the Filipino community of Watsonville can grow to be dominated by the fact that the race riots happened.
That
And
there was more to the Filipino community than just that, I guess.
exactly,
Okay.
there's so much more than the violence that was forced upon them, right? And so the second map was really created to show how the community formed, and just where some of the really important points, or stories that are sort of indicative of the more everyday, but the real experience of the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it eerie being in those places?
It is strange because, and I think this is something that sort of comes out in the map. There are these sites where rioting was happening, and there's absolutely nothing anywhere to mark it. And I think some community members will talk about, like, a lot of people that are still like rather influential in Watsonville probably are descended from people that were rioting.
Yeah.
And then you don't really know if someone that you're talking to was, their parents were
Yeah.
part of this thing.
I mean, for me, I don't think I'd mind as long as they changed, right, and stuff.
Yeah,
But as
exactly.
long as you acknowledge, like I know, like I see interviews with white Southerners whose grandparents were slave owners, but they realized, that they were able to say, what my great grandparents did was wrong. As long as they're able to do that and not hide that, I think that's okay and stuff. But yeah, and stuff. So okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
Not at
And it's
Yeah,
all.
hard to be like responsible for what your ancestors did and stuff. It's tricky to navigate.
But I guess it's just you gotta have the historical, like the education, I think
yeah,
is a, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have 8 minutes left and stuff for this other video and stuff. I'm sorry this is so short. I have a free Zoom account, so
No,
but
no worries.
okay,
Sorry,
but
I talk so much.
oh no, it's not that and stuff. It's no, I appreciate both of you are telling wonderful stories and stuff, and a lot of the stuff is new to me and stuff. So, but my last question, why is it important for younger Filipino Americans and just for the wider American community to learn about this history of the Filipino American community of both Watsonville and Pajaro Valley? Oh, should I pick again? Who wants to speak first? I get Ian. I get it. Mia, you spoke first last time, right? So, okay, Ian, you can speak first this time.
I mean, there's endless stuff I could say about this. I mean, that's why how I know I'm in the right field is because I think history is important. But
Yeah,
I mean, I think Watsonville is just a great example of what's happened, and what is happening across
yeah,
the whole country. And you can see so much. I think there's multiple ways you can approach this. Like that, just in general, you can see amazing stories like we talked about earlier of people working together across ethnic lines, despite or in spite of different problems that may have arose. I think you can see how communities, like on a more general scale, you can see how, yeah, communities interact and grow and flourish through people just being,
yeah,
wanting to spend time with loved ones and make these meaningful relationships, right? But then
yeah,
it's also, like I said earlier, the community really wants to see their history being taught to children, even though a lot of the children in the Pajaro Valley and Watsonville aren't Filipino so much anymore. I think having a knowledge of local history is vital. I mean, and I think also, from my perspective, I worked on some educational materials. I want to leave Maia some time to talk, but
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I
I
was just looking at the time. So,
yeah,
but you're doing
all right.
okay. You're doing okay. Yeah,
Having worked on some educational materials that ended up that are hopefully going to be used in the local high school, I
yeah,
think it's a perfect way to get kids interested in history in general, because they can see here's something that actually happened on a road that I walk down every single day, and I had no idea that history was so in your face and so personal, as you said earlier. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That just reminds me, we had to give tours for the Sowing Seeds exhibit. And I remember there's this one like junior high or like older elementary school group that we gave a tour to, and there were like three like young Filipino girls in the class. Um, and I think one of them had come up to me and was like, I'm half Filipino, like whatever, whatever. But I think like being able to see other Filipino people in the area and having lived here for so long, it like really gives people a strong sense of pride, and seeing them honored in museums gives like other like observers a strong sense of pride and belonging and stuff. And so, originally I think about like why is this history important? And I'm like, well, it's important to me because I love these people. And I just like I've worked with them and we've worked with them, and just like I don't know how to explain how something is important. But then, I
Yeah.
thought more, and I think this has a lot of important I learned a lot about like American imperialism in the Philippines, and we learn a lot about like international conflicts and what America does and how it affects, the whole world. And we're looking at like
Yeah.
race, obviously, and labor, and we're looking at unions, and we're looking at how like
Yeah.
like the growth of unions and how people are being suppressed. And so there's a lot of really like complex racial dynamics that I didn't know about before. And like even in Seattle and stuff, I know that there was like tannery unions that were being developed and these people were assassinated. And so, I think there's like a really rich history, but the bottom line is just like these people are just like awesome and we like love them so much. And it's just so hard to be like staring at these group of people who you feel for so strongly and be like this is why they're important, except for like like they are because they are or whatever. But yeah, I think like especially for me, like being able to interact with these older Filipino people, and my family comes from a different generation of immigration and stuff, but I think that we've connected in a lot of ways where we're both trying to like understand ourselves and our place in the world and our place in relation to each other. And I think it's really special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you both and stuff. You guys did it under the wire. We got 2 minutes left. So, but thank
Cool.
you. I think
Yeah.
just one last thing is that for both of you, this experience in the Watsonville in the heart, history is more than just facts. It made you love people and love their stories. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've always, it's great that you say that because I always felt that, part of the reason I want to pursue history is because I think it is such a powerful medium to teach people empathy.
Yeah.
If you learn about all these different groups of people, what I think you get out of learning history is learning that throughout all of human history, despite all of this horrible stuff that might have been going on, there are people just like you living and dying. And, what better place to start than your backyard as well? And,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
thank you both. Thank you both. I think
Yeah.
you both will become very good historians at some point when
Thank
you're,
you.
so yeah, we have 1 minute and 6 seconds left and stuff. But I want to thank you both and stuff for taking the time to talk to me. It's been an honor for me. Just this one meeting and stuff. I've learned a lot that I didn't know before. And since my wife lives in, we go back and forth between Watsonville and Santa Clara. I'm going to look at that digital map and stuff, and I'm going to start walking around and stuff. But thank you and stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
let her know that I don't blame her for 1930.
It's not her fault.
So,
Yeah.
okay.